In this video, we will be tasting two different versions of Dongding Oolong tea, the traditional unroasted version on the left and the more modern version that is extensively roasted on the right. In announcing the arrival of our winter 2021 batch of traditional Dongding Oolong tea, we decided to use the opportunity to do a taste comparison between the traditional Dongding Oolong that we just started offering about a year ago, I believe, in comparison to the modern version of Dongding Oolong, which has been a favorite of our fans for many years now. The modern version is definitely the most well-known, and what makes it modern is the fact that it is significantly roasted. You might call it a medium or even possibly a heavy roast oolong tea. Traditional Dongding Oolong, how it was made up until about 40 years ago, was left unroasted. The roasted factor came into existence as a result of tea merchants buying the local produce, basically the tea that was made by the local artisans, and selling it until the next season or the next year, or just simply having leftover tea around from the previous seasons, and wanting to be able to differentiate it between the new batches, the new arrivals. This is combined with the fact that tea does absorb moisture, and unroasted tea will kind of go stale in its flavor profile only. It's still fine, it doesn't go bad ever. It just gets kind of flat and loses its fresh fragrance. So by roasting it, you freshen up that flavor and you bring out flavors that weren't noticeable before. That slowly developed over years, and when the Lugu Farmers Association started their competition of Dongding Oolong tea, they created a standard of quality to be able to judge the teas by. And over the years that has evolved and changed slightly on the scale of both oxidation and roast level. But it has definitely been significantly roasted for 20 years now at least. So, after, we hang out in Dongding Oolong country more than any other tea producing region. It's where our best friends and closest tea teachers are. It's where we learn the most about tea. It also is one of the richest cultures and the most dense population of master tea makers on Taiwan. So, after getting these tidbits over 10 and 20 years, we finally decided that we need to offer traditional Dongding Oolong, which is basically the unroasted version. In addition to the fact that it's unroasted, it's also significantly more oxidized. Traditional Dongding Oolong tea comes from a close friend of ours who has inherited his father's and grandfather's farm. He's a master tea maker. He's also been a professional tea judge at the Lugu Tea Competition for over 20 years now. He is one of the few people that we know that does a lot of daigong. What is that called? Basically, I'm losing my English here. He takes the raw material from his neighboring farmers and processes it for them. So he gets paid by his local neighbors to process their tea for them in his own factory and made to order depending on what they are looking to achieve with any particular crop that they give him to process. So he has a lot of experience, more experience than most people we know in the industry, especially hands-on experience of taking other people's raw produce and processing it to the best of his ability to their request. That's a real skill. That's different. That's a different level than just having your own farm and working your own produce on a seasonal basis, which is also very deep in its level of skill and understanding. It offers probably more control over what you're able to produce because you're doing everything, or the family is doing everything, from growing the tea plants to harvesting to processing. That's how our modern Dongding Oolong tea operation works. They have their own traditional factory, no air conditioning, old school. Father and son do all the processing, And that is the way that they have done it for generations, probably. I'm getting goosebumps talking about it. This farm of our relatively new selection of traditional Dongting Oolong is less than a kilometer away from this source. So they're neighbors, basically. Very similar, basically the same climate, same farm conditions, older, you might call them heirloom, since they are decades old, and the strains of tea plants do evolve subtly, and you can see that in terms of when and where they're grown. That's a little bit more of a subtle thing, but basically the similarities among these two teas are that they grow in the same community and they're made by artisans of Dongting Oolong tea. Our source of the modern roasted version has adopted the standard, the flavor profile of the local competitions, which is roasted. We can see by the dried leaves that the traditional version is less groomed, meaning that there's more stem material in here. Slightly bigger leaf, that just has to do with when the maturity of the leaves, when they were picked and the maturity that the leaves were at. Slightly larger nuggets. One reason is that the leaves could have been slightly more mature, but also because the leaves shrink when they're roasted, not so surprisingly enough. So here we have less stem material and more concentrated leaf, so to speak. Okay, there's the history behind it. Let's get into what they are like. So as we said, I brewed 9 grams of the unroasted traditional Dongting Oolong in a 150 milliliter cup for 1.5 minutes the first brew, and then 1 minute the consecutive second and third brews. For the modern roasted version, we used 8 grams because roasted tea is by definition more concentrated. It has been shrunken by the extensive roasting. Most of the time, as in the case of these leaves, a significant amount of stem material has been removed, so it brews more concentrated. So we used 8 grams and brewed it the same way. 1 minute, 1.5 minutes, 1 minute, 1 minute. When we put the leaves, dried leaves, in this hot, heated cup, it gave off the classic savory and pastry notes. You get this real nice, balanced, full aromatic profile of soft, savory herbs and something like freshly baked scones. On the roasted version, when we put the leaves in the heated cup, it gave off a chocolatey and roasted character, almost charcoal-like. The leaves hadn't been brewed yet. It was just when they first hit a hot porcelain cup. So that just gives you the first surface aromatic profile of what these leaves are about. Now, as I smell this, it's almost not roasted at all. It's much more piney scent, a woody, a little bit of a hint of campfire smoke, but no charcoal anymore. And on the traditional Dongting Oolong, a little more vegetal, leafy green vegetable. So the profile, these are cooled down now almost to room temperature. Really changes as the leaves are brewed, and then especially after they cool down. Okay, let's have a sip. First brew of the traditional unroasted. Really nice balance of fresh and sweet. It's hard to call it vegetal, and it's not really fruity. I guess it could be something like a dark green leafy to an extent, a little bit savory herb. Something with a bit of bounce to it, something bright and vibrant in its flavor profile. Definitely a good amount of nose. Second brew, more substantial. We can see that the tea brewed a little bit more substantially from the first to the second. A little more obvious between the unroasted and the roasted. Third brew of traditional unroasted Dongding Oolong tea. The sweet factor. Our friend who makes this tea, year in and year out, says that he consistently, or almost always from his winter crop, gets a hint of honey. And that almost for sure comes from being affected by the green leafhopper. So this is slightly bug-bitten tea. It offers that vegetal plus scone due to its processing, and then just a hint of honey with this winter batch. It's most noticeable in the third brew, actually. Yeah, deep green, savory, a little bit of pastry, and very nice and sweet. Very balanced, really satisfying. It's a tea that is modest. It's not super bold, but in my personal experience, the more you drink it, the more you like it. It's just so innately satisfying. There's nothing particularly pronounced in its flavor profile. It just becomes yummier and yummier as you drink it. So we've been pretty psyched to be able to offer this. And since we are offering it on a seasonal basis, we experience it much more now that we are representing it. Okay, our regular same source for several years now, at least 5, I think probably 7, of modern roasted Dongding Oolong tea. One of the reasons we wanted to compare both of these is not to see how they stand up to each other, but to offer a comparison and a contrast between the two so that our customers can choose more wisely and with a more educated, informed perception of both of these teas. You can easily say one is roasted and one is not roasted, but what are the effects? What's the results of that? We wanted to give a little bit more of a hands-on experience of that. Much bolder. The roast factor offers a bold, pronounced flavor profile. Warming, as you may guess. Piney notes, pine wood, pine campfire, smoked pine, the smoke from pine needles. It all kind of has that rich woody factor, a little bit of nuttiness in there. But the aromatic profile is okay, a little bit more roasty. Now it's a little bit of a charcoal note in there along with the wood. Very campfire-esque. Roasted yams are the other prominent notes that come through. Roasted winter vegetables, pumpkin, butternut squash. Still very a significant sweetness to it. So it's like the sweetness that comes from roasting a yam or roasting a butternut squash. It's very dense. It has a nice dry finish to it. The dryness kind of gives the finish a kick. It makes it more pronounced. If it's only sweet, it kind of is more like a black tea, which is very thick and substantial in its profile, but doesn't give you that dry, refreshing finish as much. So same community, same tradition, same age of plants almost, and this is a family that just does their thing, and that's what they do. They've been making this style of tea for 20 years at least, actually longer, but very consistently. One of the reasons we chose this source is that they're really consistent in their produce. We only got a very small amount of this new arrival of winter traditional Dongding Oolong. We think I think it's the best one that I've tasted since we began sourcing it about 1.5 years ago. So we've sourced it 4 times now, I believe, and this one just it's thick and rich, as it is mild, but it's got a lot of substance to it. There we have it. Traditional versus roasted Dongding Oolong tea, winter 2021. Thanks for being with us.